guys, it's your host Ray
and Kat.
Welcome to Modern Outreach.
Welcome.
It's our first episode.
Very first Modern Outreach. I'm excited.
You're excited?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so happy you're excited.
How about you?
I'm excited you're excited.
I'm so excited.
Finally. It's a weirdness here because I've been begging, pleading. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, like, really though. For her to come on board and be a part of Modern Outreach and host this damn show with me. So thank you.
I'm happy we're at this point.
So guys.
That's all I can really say.
We'll sit this on a back burner till later. But meanwhile, Modern Outreach is a podcast that I thought of while being a case manager housing the unhoused.
Where we first met.
We were on the same team. And I really saw a glitch in the system. I thought that the system's a bit outdated in how things are just overall organized. I also felt like a lot of stories are untold and unknown. And I also wanted to do something really special for the city I was born and raised in, Los Angeles, California. So this is something that I wanted to bring on someone who has the same passions as I do, and who I always kind of bounce ideas off of, and we have amazing conversation anyway concerning the system and how to better help people overall. So I wanted Kat to come on so that we can team up and just put our heads together and problem solve with you guys and basically stop gatekeeping resources and things that truly help people in the city.
That's really what sold it to me. I mean, I loved the idea of like creating a space that we could talk about these things, the conversations we're having anyway. Times when we would just take our lunch break to have
a woosah moment.
Yeah, and just hash it out, or even after work. I mean, we always found that time, and it really, really helped, I think, with our clients and just being able to collaborate. I think it's so important. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I just feel like that information, like you said, like that should be more publicized. That should be just being able to offer our perspective on the work that we do, the system that we work under, and just continue to have fun and keep doing what we've been doing. Exactly.
And a lot of providers out there, no matter what you're doing, if you're serving the general population, there's ups and downs, there's burnout, there's inconsistencies within the system that get you frustrated. Maybe you have bad management that don't allow you to really help the way you want, inside of these perimeters that they sometimes put, which I call internal barriers. Maybe you're going through that, and we can definitely sympathize with you. We understand, we actually got through some, sort of toxicness within the workplace, but found each other, found a solid team, and we worked together and still provided for our clients. So it can be done no matter what the circumstances are. You just got to be a go-getter and know that you're helping people that actually need you.
Yeah, and I think with that we can really bring a positive perspective, or an honest perspective really, about what the work is, what we think could be done better, what we think is done really well. And obviously this is from our own experiences and what we've learned and picked up along the way, and that's developing as we go. I mean, I love that we still have a space where we can work together, even though we're not necessarily working in the same place anymore. And I think that just strengthens us both, and in turn, like the people that we're working with, the people that we're serving.
Yeah. And I've kind of seen the whole scope of things, working from providing services to street homelessness all the way to interim housing, so that's like shelter, and then now working in permanent housing. I've really seen the three stages, and what goes into that, what actually makes someone a successful tenant, what makes someone a successful person getting off of the street. A lot of people don't understand that people need to transition off the street, and that's just not physical, that's emotionally, psychologically, it's financially, all the physical all the physical grief that you put on your body on the streets. A doctor can't solve that overnight. Like, a doctor just can't.
And it's a lot harder to solve on the street as well.
Exactly. And so, goodness, there's so much that goes into it. And, a lot of people just spring responsibility on people when they don't understand that this person hasn't had a significant amount of responsibility in a long time, and hell, they haven't even been responsible for their own sake. And so, again, taking all that into consideration, and having sympathy, empathy, and truly understand people that are slowly but surely gonna get to a point where they can be housed because they deserve to be housed, right?
Sustainably, something that's gonna last, not something that's just a band-aid on the real problem.
Right.
And that's what we love to see.
Exactly. Yeah. So no matter if it takes you a year, 10 years, 20 years, it can be done, and there are resources out there that can help you along the way. And so,
like us,
exactly. And so, please, if you decide that, if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, yeah, I'm ready to get off the streets, I'm ready to take those steps, but I don't know where to go, we will definitely help you through that process.
Yeah, connecting you to resources, pointing you in the right direction, offering our experience. I think we have a lot to offer.
Yeah, we're kind of like your case managers, but through...
unofficially.
Yeah, through a lens, you could say. So, with that being said, we have a really good discussion that we want to present today, and it's something that has been controversial. It's relatively new. It's in full effect. Both of us have experienced it, the good, the bad, the indifferent. We have to kind of, especially when you work in social work, and especially if you are a case manager, which is housing first. So, Kat, can you please let the people know, what is housing first, please?
Housing first is a model. It is the way that we do provide our services for housing. Before Housing First, the approach was that you had certain conditions. You had to show that you were sober. You had to show that you had employment. You had to meet these certain goals in order to earn that housing, you could say. But with Housing First, it takes a different approach. It looks at the fact that having a roof over your head, having somewhere stable to permanent to live, can then make solving all those other issues a lot easier. So it's removing those barriers to housing. It's connecting people to subsidies, to something that will provide sustainability with housing, in the hopes that from that point forward, you'll be able to then address whatever it was that maybe has been holding you back from being your best self. I mean...
Yeah, and the overall idealism around Housing First has always been providing a safe place.
Yeah.
Or you're going to be housed, and then all the other services that you would need, you would then seek after the fact, after being housed, right? And so what we're seeing is... yes, people are getting housed, and there are some opportunities out there. A lot of people are getting vouchers, things like that. But then once they're housed, we're seeing a lot of people fall out of that housing. And so I want to discuss that in particular, that percentage of people falling out of housing, and why the numbers are still not matching when it comes to how much money is involved versus how many resources, and then still we have people on the street and things like that. And so one of them, in my opinion, is mental health. And I've seen mental health in so many stages, but in particular, the mental health that gets someone evicted out of their brand new permanent housing. When that typically happens, it's because they were not, in my opinion, set up for success. And so when I was a case manager, I made sure that those things were already kind of linked to services. So if I would have determined whether or not my client had mental health because I built a rapport with them, or because they allowed me to meet maybe with their workers and then we built a rapport around that, whatever the case was, I made sure that they were already diagnosed. I made sure that they were on appropriate medications. I made sure that they were aware of their mental health and what were some ways that they could calm down or go the opposite direction when it involved their housing. And so a lot of the times those things are not done. People are not getting that particular pre-housed attention that they need, and then they go into housing, and of course the landlord unfortunately can't handle those things due to fair housing laws, and we'll talk about that later, but that prohibits a landlord from basically getting into the tenant's business. They can't like, hey, like, you okay, you're wilding out, like maybe you need to go seek help. They can't say that, unfortunately, and so that puts them between a rock and a hard place, and typically that person is removed and or sent to legal and evicted. And then they're going through trauma again, and all the resources and money that went into stabilizing them, getting them into housing, prepping them is forgot. And so that's something that I want to bring up.
I think that shows the disconnect between the theory of like how it should work and the reality of how it is working. And I think you definitely hear stories like that. You definitely hear stories of it working for people, and I think it really depends on, like you said, whether or not they've been set up for success. So with that scenario, clearly there was no support that followed once that person was connected to housing. And I do think, I mean, from our experience, we've seen that the urgency of that support and those services, it falls off a little once that person is connected to housing, when in reality we should continue with that drive that was able to reach housing and continue moving that forward. Because when it gets to that point of like being stagnant and maybe falling into old ways, or maybe again not having the proper support, I mean, the roof over your head might be more of a band-aid rather than the like solution there.
Exactly.
And I think what I like to point out is the fact that housing first implies that there's something that follows. There should be something second, third. Like there is additional steps taken where housing is the first. That's the beginning. So when that's seen as like the end goal, that's okay, you've done that, you've reached housing, you're no longer considered unhoused, homeless, then what about the root cause of that led to that situation to begin with? Mm-hmm. That's where I want to really have more focus poured into is once that housing is achieved, like that sustainability of like what comes next. Like, okay, like, can you work? Okay, here are some resources of getting you connected to employment. You have significant mental health. Let's make sure you have an outpatient program that you're connected to as well, that wasn't a condition of getting into housing, but is something that will lead to success with that housing.
Right, absolutely. And when I was a case manager, okay, people, when your client has extreme mental health. And I'm talking about extreme where they're going in psychosis, they're hearing voices, you know what I'm talking about. In that situation, I never would hand someone a voucher and say, go look for an apartment, or yeah, we're just gonna, put you into housing navigation and they'll figure it out. I would never do that. I would always make sure, number one, to look for something sustainable, and we'll dive into what project-based housing is. But yeah, project-based housing, something that has all the services that they need in-house. So if someone's going through something, there is a clinician there, and that clinician can go knock on the door and literally like help that person in real time. And then they know that, oh, you know what, that person, perhaps they didn't take their medication, they'll be okay, and then they're not going to go off the deep end like a landlord because they had an outburst or things like that. They're going to work with them. And so that is like extremely important when it comes to a case manager and your role into dissecting where your clients should go.
It's really challenging to do, especially when you don't have that community of support behind you. Maybe you don't have a good relationship with your family or friends, or maybe you want to cut ties and kind of start a fresh chapter, and that comes with creating a new community around you. And I think having someone who maybe has seen people go through this process before, understands the tools needed to kind of overcome whatever barriers that is, it's a really great resource to have. So I think like variety in housing is so important to add to that, because yes, housing first could look like a lot of different things depending on what your situation is. Maybe housing first is, like you said, project based, or maybe it is something where you don't need that additional support and all you needed was like a subsidy to kind of get you back up on your feet. So
yeah,
variety, I think in this case, is always better.
Yes, and I'm not saying, oh, there's all these housing opportunities and not going to house this person because they have mental health. No, I'm not saying that whatsoever. Because in a lot of cases, if I didn't have those options for project-based housing, I was like, okay, well then it's going to come with you. And I was then connecting them to the Department of Mental Health, DMH, and getting them an intake, and then figuring out who's going to be their worker, because that worker is then going to stay with them and stick with them no matter, well, if they go or if they stay within the city limits. Basically, that worker will stay with you. If not, then they'll just relocate you to a different worker in wherever spa or section of the city you live in. So that was the key, is to make sure that that person is not alone and has someone who understands where they're coming from and will work with them no matter what and hold their hand through the process. And so setting people up for success is going a little bit above and beyond to make sure that that person is not going to slip through the cracks.
Yeah.
Because what happens is you'll have a typical apartment building with a working class or families or whatever, and then somebody will put in someone with extreme mental health. Those are the cases that are on the news. Those are the cases that you see outrageous things happening at the apartment building and you don't know what's going on. It's because that person was not connected to who they needed to be connected to make sure to walk them through the process, because you constantly have to be taught in those predicaments. You're still a growing person when you're being housed, and so someone has to be there to hold your hand, and that's okay, because they're there to hold your hand until you're ready to stand on your 2 feet, and then you can go and live a typical life and do whatever you love to do and live the life in which you're supposed to live. But until then, there needs to be some type of holding hands, some type of mentorship, some type of person who truly cares and will advocate for you when they need to, when it comes to communicating back and forth with your landlord.
Yeah, and LA has so many resources.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And I'm coming from I'm not born and raised from here. So every day I'm learning about these new resources, and I'm like, these are like, to be able to have these in other states would be such a beautiful opportunity. So the fact that there is so much here, and like the variety in which like it's not that difficult to get connected to them. It's just knowing where they are and what they do. So much of it was like we would come across a resource and we'd be like, wow, like 2 years ago, this would have been so life-changing for a client that I have. And we had to jump over all these other hoops, and if only this existed. And it's always changing. There's always new ones popping up. Funding's always changing. So I think it's like really being able to capture where that is in the right moment and being able to connect the right people to the right services.
Yeah.
It's just like connecting those dots.
Yeah, and we would love for providers to please comment and make sure that you drop whatever your agency does. Go into depth on what you do. How can people reach out to you? What are your telephone numbers? Your hours of business? Just so we can open up tunnels to like all these resources within LA that no one knows about.
Yeah. And not fall for the scams that exist out there too.
Because there's so many.
Yeah.
Yes, and unfortunately a lot of scams are around housing because they know that people need it, and unfortunately people will be people, and so you just got to make sure that everything is legit and that you know who you're working with.
Yeah.
And so back to housing first. Yes. So the next thing about housing first, which is really interesting to me, is again project-based housing. I want to go through this again because there's so many avenues of project-based housing. There's for senior citizens, and it can go by disability and or age group, right? And so that's really awesome because people stop working, they retire, they get connected to SSI, and then they're not getting the same amount of money that they were once getting, but their rent never changes.
Or rent is going up constantly and it becomes out of your budget.
Yeah. So for project-based housing, if you think that, in a year or two, I'm, going to retire, and yes, my funds are going to drop significantly, please look into these resources because they are out there. They have amazing websites. One is Chirp LA.
Yes, we use
please,
that
so often. So Chirp LA is fantastic. You can go onto there and then literally one click, you're in an apartment building seeing what's available. They'll say every single qualification that they need for that particular housing, and then they'll have a click button where you could upload the application or get in touch with whoever will be issuing applications.
And their newsletter is really great. I love being on that because there's events all over LA that kind of pop up, like food drives, clothing drives. So they let you know about what's going on, and check that out.
Nice.
Definitely a good plug.
Yes, absolutely. Then you might go into housing maybe for people experiencing mental health. There are tons, especially with the Weingart Center. They actually have their own project-based buildings all over LA. And yes, those are buildings that have in-house case management. So you have a case manager downstairs as well as a clinician as well that works with you often. If that isn't your clinician, then they work directly with your clinician on a daily basis, just on a weekly basis, just making sure that, you're taking your meds, you're doing what you're supposed to do, you're engaging, you're coming to activities, maybe you're trying to find a job. So all of that is inclusive to that. And it comes with subsidies. So it's not an arm and a leg to live in a project-based building with DMH whatsoever. I believe it's almost to the same as having a voucher, so 70% of your income. And again, you don't even have to have income. You can make as low as GR. So again, those are resources for housing that can help you get full again.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Wow.
What else?
Transitional housing. I really appreciate the creativity that's been going into the variety of transitional housing. However, there is not enough. There is not enough in LA. The fact that we have winter shelters that open up only in the wintertime and close in the summertime still baffles me to this day, that they can't remain open 24/7, 365 days a year. But that being said, the ones that do exist are really they can be a really good in between while you're waiting for housing, while you're still working to get to housing. Because the truth is, yes, the goal of Housing First is to remove those barriers to getting connected to housing, but that is still a process of getting connected. There's paperwork, there's months of approvals, you really have to be working with the housing authority or whatever agency that's getting you into that housing. So having a space where people can still work on those other goals while they're getting that connected to permanent housing, especially for victims of domestic violence, that is so critical to have some stability, because at that point they're fleeing. And this is something that's chronically I'd say under-resourced, just because there's not enough out there in LA, in California, across the country. Yeah. Just in general, the amount of need does not translate to the amount of support that exists, and it's so frustrating.
So true. When I worked in shelter, I can't tell you how many times case managers would call, like, hey, I have a DV client, do you have room? And unfortunately, we did not. And
they need a different level of support than just regular shelters, because regular shelters can be a huge trigger for people experiencing domestic violence.
Come on now.
Having somewhere secure, somewhere private, sometimes being surrounded by other women, that can be super critical as well, because they're starting all over. These individuals, these families, they are having to start a whole new life, and that can take time to get that right. So rather than having to sleep in that car, you have a shelter of some sort, where there's consistent food, there's consistent
case management.
Yes, mental health support. Yeah. Someone that can easily get you to the doctors. Like, there are so many opportunities that just we need to tap into.
Yeah, seriously. There's so many outlets. There's another form of housing. What about SROs?
I have mixed feelings about SROs.
Let's talk about that.
I think it is a way... I think it works for a very specific type of person. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's transitional housing that's being called permanent housing.
Which is not right.
Because there's a difference. Permanent housing means that is where you're trying to stay to work on everything else. SRO housing is, I would say, it's close to community living with your own, like, personal bedroom.
It's a daggone motel. It's like a motel room, or it's like it's like they're like the grossest things ever, and they expect people to like start their lives off in there. It's not realistic, and it's a band-aid effect.
They're again in dangerous areas most of the time.
Always with lurking criminals, lurking like cringe-worthy people in them, and they're just trying to fill rooms up. So there are good things about Housing First, but a lot of the options are not okay.
Yeah, because there's the variety in which you could get matched to ranges from an SRO housing, which is easy to get matched to. It's like it's essentially a room. You share a kitchen. You sometimes have
share a bathroom. Sometimes.
Yeah. And then you have like these beautiful 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, brand new units that are considered affordable housing, or the percentage is put aside for affordable housing. Like, the voucher can get you into either one of those. And I think it's a good thing that there is some variety that it provides, but I can't back SRO housing.
Yeah. It's something special.
It works for a certain type of person. Maybe that in between, it's easy to get into. If you have a lot of criminal background history, if you have huge barriers that are preventing you from getting into other housing, it's a good thing to fall back on.
Ish.
Yeah.
Then you might have agencies who are now looking into buying shared housing. which is a little different. It's typically like maybe it's a house or maybe it's an apartment, but in that apartment you might have a 2-bedroom and then they're going to split that 2-bedroom. So now you have 2 occupants per bedroom, but then you're still paying astronomical prices as well. And so typically, I mean, those are options as well, but sometimes difficult to get a hold of because a lot of agencies do shared housing, I know, or a landlord might opt and decide that maybe they want to list their home as a shared housing home somewhere. Again, this is something I put along the lines of a halfway house when people get out of jail. It's like the same concept. Again, just something to get you off the street so that you can start saving, get a job, things like that.
I mean, I've seen some good versions of shared housing as well. I mean, I used to have roommates all the time, so...
But that's a shared housing that you chose.
True, but you can also...
The system didn't say you should live there.
Yeah, but there are ways in which, okay, maybe you and your friend are looking for... Both have vouchers and you're looking for a place. You find a 2-bedroom that can kind of work, you know?
When does that ever happen? Goodbye.
I wish it happened more.
That never happens, but okay, so if you and your friend got a voucher, then you're gonna say, yeah, like, let's live together.
Okay. What I'm saying is how, like, shared housing is a gamble, okay? You could end up with a really questionable individual, or you could end up with someone
99.9% of the time.
That's not true.
Okay.
I am for shared housing.
It's because that's how you chose to live.
But it works. I'm not sharing housing
broke,
now.
Okay, if you're broke, you're trying to save dimes, then move in with your friends. Okay, fine. Okay, but if you're homeless and they're like, "Yo,
that's a stepping stone."
I'm saying it's a stepping stone.
Okay.
I'm listing things that are stepping stones.
But you just straight slandered shared housing.
Period.
I gotta defend it a bit.
Defend your honor. Defend. I say do not get shared housing, people, unless it's your family.
It can get but it works a lot quicker than if you have to wait 6 months, 8 months for your own housing.
And then you wake up with someone with a knife over you, like, yeah, go ahead.
Screen your roommates. That's what. Please screen your roommates.
The system does not screen your roommates, by the way. I just want to say that.
It's like. That's true.
That first day of college, when you got your roommate, and then you're like, oh shoot, like, okay, here it is. I'm gonna meet my roommate for the first time, and you open it, and you see what's up. You know what I'm talking about,
and then that
y'all.
person becomes your best friend. Or not. It could go both ways, but.
Anywho. Housing first, in my opinion, sucks because it doesn't have a second, third, and fourth part to it. Now, if it did, okay, we're going to house these people, absolutely. But once they're housed, they're still going to have a case manager, a supportive services, whatever the case, to make sure that they handle the responsibilities of becoming a new tenant. They're going to have to pay rent. They're going to have to pay bills. They're going to save their money. They're not living on the street, parlaying, buying whatever they want anymore. Like, it's real. And sometimes it shocks people's system. And they don't know how to react, and they don't know how to act, and they don't know how to get help. And then they become homeless again. So I'm just for housing someone, but keeping them housed. That's all I'm for.
I'm for that too. Absolutely. Think that with the right changes, it can work well. I always like to draw this parallel between the medical system and the services that we provide and the system that we work under, because at the end of the day, I think preventative care is the most effective at avoiding like those long-term traumas, those long-term recoveries needed. If we're able to address what is leading to homelessness and leading to losing your housing, that's what I think where all of the time and energy should be poured under. And I get that Housing First is trying to be that, but I think, again, like you said, maybe some adjustments would be beneficial for the system. Maybe a couple tweaks.
It sucks. It sucks. It's horrible.
Definitely some room for improvement here.
And I'm going to say it because you know what? I'm not a case manager anymore. Let's go. I can literally say it sucks, bro. And I'm sorry that people are forced to house people when they know doggone well that perhaps they could have done better. They could have put them in a more secure place. Again, putting an attic downtown LA to house them, I don't necessarily think that's a good idea. Some other case managers be like, whoo, found you housing downtown LA where you love. You're down there anyway. So let me just check you off and house you out there. And then to the demise of that person, they go down the drain. And I'm all in the business of pulling someone up. And sometimes your client, if you're a case manager, your client is going to give you pushback, and they're going to throw a tantrum. They're going to call you every name in the book. Then they're going to throw the book at you. And literally, you got to hold on, because people don't understand. Sometimes someone has the best intentions for you when you don't have them for yourself. And that's a huge part of being a case manager. So I challenge those who are case managers, if you're having difficult clients that you're trying to house, that you push to house them where they are going to succeed and not where they're going to fail.
Don't give up on them.
Don't give up on them. Be patient and lead by example. If they try to push your buttons, show them what it looks like to keep your composure and get to the task at hand.
And sometimes that failure does lead to success, and that failure needed to happen in order to get there.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we'll put a placement that we think is really good, and a few months later it turns out that was not the case. That's you're adjusting with new information. At that point, okay, like you work on trying to find a solution, you find another housing opportunity when you're able to, and just being able to work creatively to solve those problems, work with the clients, the participants, and have them be working on their goals as well. Don't do it for them. You should be empowering people to make these decisions. You're a guide. You're not doing everything for them. We're not assistants. Please don't treat us like that.
No, we definitely are not. And make sure that you practice your motivational interviewing, making sure that people stay focused on their goals.
Okay, dropping the lingo.
Period.
Make sure you have some trauma-informed care.
Yes.
At all times.
All times. Lead with trauma-informed care.
Please.
Educate yourself on what trauma-informed care is.
And make sure you have positive intent with your actions.
Yes. And please, make a list. Make a list, because harm reduction is real.
It is. And it works.
And it works, okay? You can actually help somebody swing down from whatever they're on just by those little conversations. And instead of this, what about this? Instead of that, what about this? Always give alternatives. Always give options in case management. Because sometimes people forget when they're one-dimensional, one-directional. You got to redirect people all the time. You got to keep people focused on what the goal is. And that's a part of the job. And if you're a good-hearted person and you're like, dang, I've been case managing without case managing. make sure that you check your local agencies and your nonprofits to see if they are hiring, because we need good-hearted people who care about humanity, who care about other people, who want to see people succeed, and no matter what trials that they're going through or what stages of life they're in, everyone deserves a second chance. And if you're one of those people who are willing to give it all to somebody, I think case management would be good for you.
Yes, we always need more case managers.
Yeah. If you loved this episode and you really enjoyed the conversation, I hope you commented, number 1.
Please.
Number 2, I hope you liked.
And tell your friends.
And lastly, I hope you subscribed.
And tell your friends.
For our next episode, we will be talking about the steps that you should not be taking towards being unhoused.
Yes, the steps to avoid.
Steps to avoid becoming homeless, because literally, all jokes aside, it's been incredibly sad, depressing, seeing my beautiful city on fire. With the last Palisades fire, the Altadena fire, and several other fires. And we just want to send our heart and prayers out to those affected by the fires. We love you so much. We are so sad and devastated that this has happened to you. And now LA, we have an entirely new class of the unhoused people, on top of being in the middle of a housing epidemic here. And so a lot of resources were already spread, and now, I mean, God willing, things will change, but we will be actually letting you guys know of different resources that we hear of that are coming down the line, so that you guys could, possibly start making those steps to pulling life back together again, and what that looks like. If you are experiencing any mental health during these hard times, whether you're impacted straight on, or you've just been watching this tragedy happen and you're impacted, I recommend visiting one of your local Department of Mental Health offices. They're all around SoCal. Get the help that you need. Talk to a professional, so that we all can just figure it out together. We're all in the same boat, and I'm sure that just talking to someone will really help you.
Yeah, for sure.
And with that said, that's it. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye. No one loves you. Mo loves you. Remember that. And Kat's gonna hit the button. Peace. Like, comment, and subscribe.
Like, comment, and subscribe. Please. And thank you.
Konnichiwa.